This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Bishop Desmond. Hopefully everyone can hear me, and welcome to this Windrush National Organisation online engagement meeting. Pleased that you can join us. This is a regular meeting that we always have. Our strapline is advocating today for a better future, and we're very much about delivering on the strategy for those who have been affected by the Windrush scandal and delivering across the Windrush status and compensation schemes. With these meetings, we always do start with a word of prayer. So those of you who wish to do so can join us at this time, and then we'll go into a bit more of the proceedings for the rest of the meeting. For those of you who wish to join us at this time, shall we just pray? Father, we thank you for keeping us today and providing for us in so many ways. We just ask for your Holy Spirit to guide us and direct in all things. We thank you for your provisions towards us and your mercies towards us. We ask, Lord, that you continue to lead and direct as we look to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, I want to again just extend this welcome. I'm sure hopefully most of you are familiar with the Zoom etiquette, and that we are delighted to have with us members of the Home Office. There will be presentations, and as we're talking about Zoom etiquette, we're asking if you can stay on mute. That would be really appreciated. Thank you very much. We're going to be hearing a bit more about the update on the Wendy Williams progress report, and Bishop Desmond will give you a bit more details about that leading into this. Just to say that as part of the today's meeting, as normal, these meetings are being recorded, so please do bear that in mind. We have our website whereby we do put these sessions on our website, the windrushnationalorganisation.com, and also just to let you know as well that we have updated our website with the last series of questions that were presented in the last monthly engagement meeting, that you can get a real up-to-date as to some of the discussion and issues around Windrush compensation and Windrush status from the last online meeting. This is very much your meeting, and it's an opportunity to actually have an engagement with the Home Office as well. And we don't take this lightly. We do this respectfully, but we do it openly. And so we really want to ensure that there is an opportunity where we can actually hear, listen, and also challenge as needs be as well. I'm just at this point now would like to hand back over to Bishop Desmond Jadu, who would lead us into the next part of the meeting. Bishop Desmond.
Thank you, Reverend Clive, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our meeting. First thing I'd like to do is thank the Home Office. We gave them 2 months of questions because we got a little bit behind. And as Reverend Clive has said, those have been posted on our website. They're on our website now, and they're on our website in such a way that the PDF is there. If you click on it, you'll be able to print the document off as well on your own PC at home. So it's completely accessible alongside the videos. Our videos now go up online within 72 hours. So by Monday morning, the video of the meeting will be up. Just a little bit of housekeeping to add to Reverend Clive. At the last meeting, I did say, if you are unable to show your face, you will not be able to answer a question. At the last meeting, someone challenged that, and I'm not going to go into the challenge privately, and I allowed it. And then something that I consider to be disrespectful was said. Therefore, unless we can see your face, I will not allow a question to be asked. And anyone who challenges that, right, privately, I will give consideration to removing them from the meeting. We are not here to, I don't like to be abused. And believe me, in my lifetime, I've been abused several times. And I don't think we should be seeking to abuse others either.
No,
And I will not tolerate it.
Women, Marianne.
In addition to that, and can I ask everyone, please, to put yourself on mute? Now, just to add to that, when we did our first few meetings, we had some people come onto the meeting and they used the N-word against us. And I screenshot that and I gave that to the police. Much didn't come of it, but at least I was in a position to do so. So if we don't want people to abuse us, then we shouldn't be abusing people either. It works both ways. And I'll make no apologies for saying this because, you know, I treat people how I expect it to be treated. And it's as simple as that. In terms of the work that we've been doing, at this time, a very significant case, a Windrush case. I'm not going to say what it is because they've asked me to keep it private, but a significant Windrush case. A lady has lost her husband 2 weeks ago and their compensation claim is going through. Not here to say that, talk about that tonight. It's just so that you know that somebody has suffered a loss. And I just want us to have a moment's silence for her. And as I've said, you know, for her family and for her husband who's passed away. And the Home Office have been very quick to act and very supportive in this. I have to say it how it is because they have been. But importantly, it's just a moment's silence in reverence for all those who have passed away, who have been caught up in this at this time. So if we just have a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, so as far as it's concerned this evening, the agenda's moved slightly. I've got some additional information which we'll put at the end of the meeting. And also as well, we're talking about raising the standard, and our Director of Marketing, Nigel Guy, was supposed to present that. He'll now be doing that at around about 8:20 or a little earlier. It depends how this session goes with the Q&A, etc. So at this time, Reverend Clive, I'm going to hand the reins back to you to manage Kate's presentation, what Kate's saying, and also the Q&A. And I'm going to keep quiet for a bit. So over to you.
Thank you, Bishop Desmond. Just to say to colleagues on the call as well, please do use the chat if you want to ask questions, and you can use that facility as well. What we would like to do is to bring on our Home Office representatives today and let them give us the update on the Home Office response to the Wendy Williams findings. And I'm sure we're all aware of the immense report that Wendy Williams produced. And I'm sure there are people on this call who may have participated in that report as well. I know there are many colleagues on here who have done that. So just to say that initially, we're going to be hearing from our Home Office representatives. They'll be doing the presentation. If you have a question, perhaps you want to put that in the chat, or you want to hold until afterwards, there will be a session for that to lead on that as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kate Ridley-Moy and the rest of the colleagues who's going to present to us the latest findings, progress report on the Wendy Williams report. Kate.
Great, thank you very much. So for those of you I haven't met before, I'm Kate Ridley-Moy. I'm the head of the Windrush programme team in the Home Office, and I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleague Mark Osborne. So as Clive Foster said earlier, this is very much your meeting, and we are keen that we don't come along and sort of take up the whole time talking at you. So we will do a relatively short overview of Wendy Williams' progress update. I'm also conscious that some of you may have heard this from me relatively recently over the last couple of weeks. So I don't want to be too repetitive, but for others it is possibly new information. So hopefully we'll get that pitch right. But then, as we say, we'll have questions and answers afterwards. just to give a bit of context, so the Windrush programme team was set up in the Home Office 2 years ago, and Mark and I joined that in its first week. So it was established the week that Wendy Williams published her Lessons Learned review, and we've been the kind of hub that has overseen the Home Office response to that. Over time, that team has grown, so it now includes the Windrush engagement team. So that is people like David Levy, who many of you will have met, and Azar, who's been to lots of the events as well. So that engagement team has now joined our Windrush programme team. And we also have set up a new community stakeholder engagement hub as well. So that's to take some of the learnings from Wendy Williams' Lessons Learned review about the need to do more community engagement and apply those to other areas of the department. So, for example, we've been doing work with the deaf and disabled community recently, or at the moment we're doing some work with the Ukrainian community in the UK. And again, that's about listening to what Wendy told us about community engagement. But the core part of our team is responding to Wendy Williams' Lessons Learned review. So we've spent the last 2 years, we've taken all 30 of her recommendations and we've been progressing those. And in October, Wendy came back. So that was something she always said that she would like to do. And the Home Secretary invited her to come back 18 months on to see how the department had changed. So she came back with her own independent team. They went through approximately 2,000 documents from the Home Office. They asked for evidence of various things, evidence of progress, asked us to update them on how we were doing. They also did an external engagement activity, and so I think she will have spoken hopefully to quite a lot of you on this call as part of that, and done surveys as well to see what the outside, the Home Office thought we were doing as well. And then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, she published her progress update. It's an excellent read if you haven't read it already. The introduction and the conclusion are only very short in terms of a couple of pages each, and provide a really good summary of her take. So Mark and I will just sort of give you the headlines from that. I've got the lucky job of telling you some of the good bits, and then I'm going to pass over to Mark, who's going to draw out some of the areas where Wendy thought we could have done better or we need to go further in the future. So I guess the first thing to say is that we were really pleased that Wendy acknowledged the scale of the challenge that she set us. So I think her words was that, you know, the recommendations she set provided us with a daunting challenge, and that her take on that is that we have risen to that challenge. But there is still an awful long way to go. So, you know, the Home Office needs to undergo some pretty radical change from where we were 2 years ago. And we are only at the beginning of that journey. It's a very long process to change an organisation this big and to address all of the challenges that Wendy pulled out. But overall, she said that we have risen to that challenge, and she pulled out quite a lot of areas where we have made good progress. And we were really proud of the fact that she also pulled out some of the teams that she'd spoken to, who she felt, you know, staff at all levels of the organisation, from the permanent secretary down to people working in our teams, the compensation team, the passport office, really embodied the passion and the desire to improve the Home Office. So there were lots of things that she pulled out where we had done really well. And, you know, in some cases, she even thought that we had met the objectives of the recommendations that she'd set us. But I'll pass over to Mark, who can pull out some of the detail of where it is that we think that we might need to go further.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm delighted to be here and to have a conversation with you this evening. It's one of the things that we really need to get much better at as an organisation. So Wendy's original report, I think she was very interesting in terms of saying she'd like us to be very thoughtful and to take some time to really reflect on what it is that she said, and to think about how we responded to that. That's something that we're trying to do this time as well. So rather than a very quick initial reaction, we're really trying to listen to what it is she's trying to say to us and to really hear that. One of the first observations she made was that when we responded to her original report, we grouped the work in a particular way. So we come up with themes that made sense to us as an organisation based on how we wanted to take the work forward. And And Wendy's just posed a question for us, really, to say we should think about that and maybe reflect in the fullness of time that we've now had about whether some of that grouping, the way we've grouped them, because it made more sense to us as to how we were going to change the organisation, is maybe place a different emphasis to some of the recommendations that Wendy had and how she structured them. Not the recommendations themselves, maybe, but how they grouped, which I think is a really interesting point. So that sense of Wendy's report being understandably very anchored in race, and that we have responded not only to that, but in some of our recommendations in a wider sense as well, about having sort of a fully diverse and inclusive aspect to that response. And I think there's something really important for us as an organisation to go back on there and say, okay, well, it may have been how we wanted to group the work, it may have been what made sense to us at the time, but actually have we really fully covered the observations that Wendy made there? And we're taking the time to really think that through. Also, one of the things that Wendy's touched on, and Kate said, yeah, she's formed a view of how well we've done a year into our work in terms of how far we've got. And one of those aspects is that Wendy sort of said, Wendy really said, yeah, there's some recommendations she thinks that we could probably never close. So she would say that some of the more cultural aspects of this work, the longer term pieces that are more difficult to do, that will take more time to really show that change, I think she thinks we could probably never change, never close, and that maybe the approach we've had is where we've said, well, we're not closing anything in terms of stopping to care about it, but in the sort of the programmatic sense, the way we're managing that, we may not have those conversations quite as directly, but we're very clearly measuring that impact, that change we want to see, and whether that's quite right as a balance, and what sort of message that might be sending as well. So I think there's some really interesting things here that we'd like to have with you as a conversation this evening about sort of how do we reassure. I think that's a real sense of Randy's work coming through there. There's something that she rightly calls out that she thinks is, you know, I think we feel we've not made the progress we'd like to, and Wendy very clearly highlights this as well, is that sort of the representation at a very senior level. So that sense that the SCS, the most senior civil servants in the Home Office, are changing and having much more representation, particularly from Black colleagues in that sense. And that's not something that we've made as much progress as we want to, and we'd like to, and indeed we need to. And I think Wendy's right to call that out. We publish very openly statistics on the diversity of our workforce, but it's really important that we are not only held ourselves to account, but others do as well. And that's a really important aspect of our work, and also a way of showing that change and that real difference at a very senior level, and that buy-in that, again, Wendy sort of touches on a little bit in her report in terms of she heard a lot from, I think she gave about 1,000 colleagues, so, you know, a very broad cross-section of the department, but whether that's, you know, that representation is representative of buy-in at the most senior level in terms of that cohort of people. And I suppose at a personal level, the part that's most embarrassing and most difficult to be sharing with you is the sort of the training and the development aspects of this. So Wendy had some really clear recommendations on what it was that we should be doing to help our colleagues in the Home Office better understand our history, to have different relationships with ministers, particularly at the most senior level of the organisation, and also in terms of our diversity and inclusion aspects of our work. And we've been very thoughtful about how we've done that, and we've been very deliberate and persistent in an approach that means that what we produce when it goes live will be really right for us, rather than something we can do quickly to all sort of 38,000 of our colleagues. But that's taken more time than we hoped it would do. And Wendy's rightly, you know, highlighted that and said that's just not the progress that she wanted to see, or indeed that we needed to make. So we've done a lot at a very local level, and we've done lots of things that are really important to start that understanding. But what we've not been able to do is to launch that very formal program of work, and that will happen later this year. And I think when we've got that, that will be a really significant moment for us as a department and for our colleagues as well. And Wendy rightly highlights that. So I think, you know, in that sense of Kate said, there's some recommendations that she feels we've done well on, but there's some areas of frustration that we've touched on there. And I think also she wonders whether we are quite as up for external scrutiny as she hoped we would be. So I think that sense of, if you look at some of the recommendations where we've made less progress, they tend to be in the area of external scrutiny. So for example, the Migrants Commissioner is one where we've not again made the progress that we'd like to. And she wonders if that's something that's sort of systemic within the department that actually reflects a wider nervousness around external scrutiny. And again, I think it's a really interesting observation she makes, and we will take time to really reflect on that rather than sort of respond at a very sort of emotional level or a very rapid response in terms of how we feel about that. But I think it's a really important observation. And then about engagement publicly as well, that's partly why we're really pleased to be here at the moment, having this conversation, is that sense of, well, how is it that we really listen and really hear, and then hearing can really act? So to me, part of how we, both in terms of stakeholders like yourselves, but also our colleagues within the organisation, how we really convince them and indeed reassure them that Wendy's been, but the work will continue, is a really important conversation. So that's that sense of reassurance, both for Kate and I, who obviously deeply care about this, which is why we've been working on it for the last 2 years, but also for yourselves, other stakeholders and our colleagues, just to, how do we build that reassurance that this is, where we've not made the progress that we need to and want to, we will, that will reflect in a very mature way on what it is that Wendy's made as observations, and take time to thoughtfully respond to those, but also to do more in terms of the areas where we've not made the progress that we'd like to. So that's sort of, I guess, a capsulation of where we are in terms of some of the more challenging parts of that report.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark. And then to hopefully finish us on a little bit of a high again, what are we going to do next? So Wendy talks about the fact that she is, in her words, the department is at a tipping point. So Wendy has now finished her revisit. There won't be a sequel. So she's very clear that this is now up to the Home Office to drive this work forward, and that we face two choices. We either sort of sigh with relief because Wendy has gone and she won't be coming back, and we can sort of put all of this in a drawer and forget all about it, or we build on the momentum that has already been made and the goodwill and the passion amongst our staff, and we continue this work. Our ministers and our executive committee and our staff are very clear that we want to continue the work, we want to build on what's already been done, but it is imperative, therefore, that we do that in a new and a different way. And part of that is about us being more proactive, rather than relying on Wendy to write a progress report to tell you what we've been doing. We will need to have a think in the future about how we report on our progress. So that's something that our team is doing, and we'd very much welcome your ideas as to how we can reassure you, how we can show you how the work has continued, and what is the best way to do that. Like, some of Wendy's recommendations are quite technical, so recommendation 23 goes into risk management, or 22 is about sort of knowledge management. There is it's possibly a little bit niche for most people, but what is it that we can do to tell you and show you about the work that we are doing? And that's where it'd be really helpful to get your views. And in terms of what happens next, so our staff, I think we had about 6,000 staff dial in the day after Wendy's report was published, and we had a session with our permanent secretaries, a panel. We heard from some of the junior staff who've been working on the compensation scheme. We also heard from Nigel Hills, who I think came along to your meeting last month, and then we had lots of questions from Home Office staff about our progress. Wendy's coming in to do a similar event. She'll be interviewed by the permanent secretary at the beginning of May, and we're planning on doing quite a lot of activity in June to coincide with Windrush Day. So there is still an awful lot of activity planned inside the Home Office, but that is probably less visible to you. So as I say, do let us know how we can try and keep some of that a bit more visible and help you to kind of feel informed. But for those of you who've read Wendy's report, thank you for doing that, and just be really interested to hear of your sort of thoughts and questions about what she said. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate, and thank you very much, Mark, for your reflections on the progress report. I'm going to give colleagues the opportunity to raise their hands and to put some any points, questions, observations that they would like to around the whole report, and any points that they wish to make in what they've heard so far this evening. Just to say, I think there is widespread, obviously, recognition that the 30 recommendations that Wendy put forward to the Home Office, I think there is a recognition, and I think, Mark, you alluded to it, that a lot of the changes is around the internal development of the Home Office, which is going to be the responsibility per se of the Home Office to develop those changes. And it wouldn't be incumbent upon stakeholders to putting their fingers in that, as it were. But what I think is important is where stakeholders, people who are supporting people or experience it personally, we can start to tackle some of those issues from that perspective. So part of our own strategy document, and I'm just asking colleagues just to be thinking about your own questions, and we'll come to you. But I just want to make a couple of points with regards to Windrush National Organisation. We were committed to a couple of the recommendations in our strategy document. Initially, recommendation 3, which talks about building on the engagement and the outreach that's already been taken place. And so we're concerned about the monitoring on that, and so that it would enable people who've been affected to articulate the impact of the scandal and the lives and so forth. So one of the things that I would like to ask initially is that Wendy's response to that is about, she's concerned about the pace of developing wider external scrutiny arrangements. And I know, Mark, you touched on that, but where is the Home Office going in terms of that area with regards to recommendation 3 in that regards?
Yeah, do you want me to pick that one up now?
Yep, yes,
yep.
Please.
So on recommendation 3, so this is around what Wendy termed reconciliation events. There's a range of different things. So obviously, since the Windrush scandal broke, we've been doing sort of community engagement such as this. We've been coming out before COVID, coming out and meeting people in person. So there's been that kind of low level community engagement all the way through. In terms of the specific reconciliation activity, that has proved harder than we, or indeed Wendy, envisaged. And she did helpfully clarify in her revisit report that perhaps, I think the term reconciliation might not have been the easiest or best choice of words in order to help us to undertake the sort of activity that she had in mind. Because one of the things it's led to is a real difference and a strength of opinion about what is the best thing to do. And Wendy touches on that a little bit in her write-up, but and some of you have been working with the mediation organisation that we've brought in to try and help us through that kind of impasse. But the situation we've had at the moment is that there is zero consensus about how we should approach that recommendation, but there is a lot of strength of feeling, and some people saying we should do more, other people saying it's impossible to even begin that until we have made more progress on compensation payments, and that it would be disingenuous to try and reconcile with the community whilst there are still people waiting for their compensation, whilst other people saying no, that's not right, you should be taking that forward faster. And yeah, as I say, there is no consensus about the best thing to do. And what we don't want to do is to sort of plough in thoughtlessly and end up upsetting people who we have already harmed and making things worse than they already are. So that's why we've been working with the mediation company, and they are currently in the second phase of that, which is developing some options, which will then hopefully be tendering out and asking people to help us deliver that reconciliation activity. So that's where we are with that formally. On the sort of more general thing, we continue to want to do community engagement. So if we sort of park the word reconciliation for now because it's quite controversial, we continue to want to do community engagement. We are very much aware of the benefits of that. The work that we've been doing through the Community Fund has really highlighted that, and that's now something that we're advising other areas of the Home Office to consider as well, because, you know, we are a big organisation, and actually often the people that we need to reach and the people that we need to listen to and work with are not all that inclined to work with the Home Office, but they will work with trusted partners and intermediaries. And that's where, again, people like yourselves have been so helpful over the last couple of years in terms of, some of you have been Windrush ambassadors, in terms of getting those messages out, because people are far more likely to trust information that comes from yourselves. But equally, we value working with trusted stakeholders to do things like revising application forms, revising guidance, picking up on errors that we might have overlooked. That's the sort of thing where it's essential that we work with people. So so it's a kind of mixed response on recommendation 3. I think there are lots of things where we have already made good progress and work continues and we value it hugely. But I think the reconciliation events itself have been a stumbling block, partly because of the terminology used. But I do think Wendy's report is a really helpful way of maybe overcoming that a little bit. I think she's really clarified that for us, which is very welcome.
Okay, and I noticed in the chat there, thanks for that, Kate, that Dawn Hill from BCA is kind of says Zaza, who's leading on this, is calling it is restoration and is planning a report on possible events as well.
Yeah, I think the contribution that's coming through that is incredibly helpful. So my great thanks to people who've been working with Zaza on that work. It sounds like it's a far more promising direction than we'd managed to get to before. So that's really good.
Okay, so I'm going to come to Judy and Neil, but there was Hazel in the chat talked about, what about the applications that Teresa may destroy? Do you think these people's whose files were destroyed should receive automatic citizenship? That seems like a specific question. I'm not sure if any.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. In terms of, so there were some like landing cards, which were not kept. They weren't applications in terms of, they weren't applications for documentation or status.
That's right, yeah.
But the landing cards were originally destroyed. I mean, there's a logistic challenge, which is if we don't have the landing card, we don't know who the people were, and therefore there is no way of providing automatic citizenship. But anyone who is coming forward, you know, people who are coming forward for documentation, I think we have issued over 18,000 documents confirming citizenship, and that is free of charge. So hopefully we are trying to achieve the intention, but it does require people coming to the Home Office to say that they are in need of documentation. And as I say, sort of nearly 20,000 people have done that, for which we are very grateful. And we have been issuing that documentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring in Judy Richards at this time, and then Neil afterwards, and then Jean.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not clear. I mean, the way I would expect the review document and the report to have been dealt with would have been to have had a work programme that would set targets with over, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, whatever number of years. And I'm not clear that you've actually got a work programme, that it's publicly available so that people can see at what stage you should be at any given time and can see where they might be able to fit in and help. Stakeholders have been mentioned, but I think what often happens in statutory organisations is stakeholders is people that they know, or people who magically find their way through quite a tortuous system to get into meetings like this and others. And I'm not clear what work is done to identify others who are perhaps working on similar cases. So for instance, Global African Congress UK that I represent reports to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination when the government reports every 5 years. There's, well, not that they've done it recently, but and there's a number of other bodies that do that. So I would say that they are stakeholders, but I don't recall ever being approached by the Home Office and asked about our opinions about the Wendy Williams review, about Windrush, or any of the related work that's going on. So I wonder, where is a list of stakeholders that we could actually find and say, well, actually, we think there's a gap. We think there are people that should be consulted and involved, and this is where they could be consulted and involved, so that we can actually share it around the contacts that we know that are doing work around this area to make sure that you've got a better input from communities and, I mean, stakeholders is such a broad term, but people actually directly affected and working with those directly affected by the scandal.
Great, thanks, Judy. I think we've got the point. I think that seems to be speaking around recommendation 8 as well, Kate, I think, from what Judy was saying there. Any response from either yourself or Mark on that?
Mark, do you want to talk about the comprehensive improvement plan?
Absolutely, very, very happy to. Apologies if when I was talking earlier, I'd not made that clear to people. So basically, the first thing we did, Judy, was when when Wendy's report came out, so we thought deeply about how to both address the 30 recommendations that she specifically had, but also that wider spirit and intent. So we were really aware from the beginning that actually you could do all the 30 things that Wendy said and still sort of miss the point in terms of not getting that wider spirit and intent as well. So we spent, so Wendy was very wise. She said, I know what you're like as departments and civil servants. You tend to either respond to things very quickly and then forget about them, or respond very slowly and forget about them. I'm going to suggest you spend 6 months thinking very carefully about what you're going to do, that you then publish that, and I will then come back in a year's time after you published it to see how you're doing. So that sort of very much was the landscape in which we put together, as Kate said, a comprehensive improvement plan, which is a program of work for each of the recommendations that talks about what it is we're going to do and when we'll be doing that. And Kate's just put a link there on the site. So that's published. It was laid in the House, so that the Home Secretary presented that to Parliament. I think, you know, sort of it's available on gov.uk, so it's available through that site as well. So it is a very public commitment that we made, and what it is we will do. And Wendy, when she came back, was judging both our progress against what it is we said we'd do. So when he goes more broadly in terms of commitments, are you making the right commitment? Are you making the right pace? And are you making real change in terms of that? So she's looking at what is it she said, suggested we did, what is it we said we'd do? Did she feel that was right? And have we made the progress that we said we would make, and can she see change really happening? So we have a program that meets on a monthly basis. It's chaired by our most senior and attended by our most senior civil servants in terms of the organisation, and it has real accountability and incredibly frank conversations amongst itself about the progress that we're making. So to the point of, is there a programme? Absolutely, there is a programme with all the attributes you'd expect to be of a programme. It's very public in terms of commitments we've made, and therefore people's ability to hold us to account for that. And as Pete said earlier on, we're looking
Frankie's brother
a little bit more about how we can also even increase that in terms of that external accountability and the measures that we're going to be having. So that sense that we really want to both internally and externally show the progress we're making, the difference that we're seeing. And that's really at the heart of what we're doing. But yes, a very, very much program, very, very much public commitments, and absolutely scrutinised, both within the department and externally through Wendy in this case, in terms of what we're doing progress-wise.
Thanks very much. And the question around engaging with other organisations, you know, what Judy talked about, and also talks about that in recommendation 8.
Yeah, so I'm happy to pick up that one. So I mean, the list of people the Home Office engages with is incredibly extensive, and it will vary for different policy areas as well. There is a, you know, even just within migration and borders, which is a relatively tiny part of the Home Office, there is something called a vulnerabilities group, which brings together a whole load of stakeholders who represent different vulnerable sections of the community who are impacted by our migration and borders response, but that won't be fully comprehensive of every organisation that is out there. Similarly, on Windrush, we have a list, I think it's about 160 stakeholders, of which, you know, many of you in this room are some of them. There is each policy area will have its own selection of who for them are their key stakeholders, but I do completely agree with your point around, you know, it needs to be a broad group of people. What doesn't work, and this is one of the things that we are trying very hard to change as a Home Office, is if you just sort of create an echo chamber of people who you already know, who probably already agree with you, and who are going to come along and tell you that whatever it is that you're doing is absolutely the right thing. That might be easier in the short term, but it doesn't lead to good policy making. And that is something that, you know, we are very committed to. I think I've said to some of you before, it isn't always easy for policymakers to take that bold step and to kind of come out and speak directly to stakeholders, particularly on some of the trickier issues. But when people have done that, it has been incredibly valuable. So again, some of you have spoken to some of our colleagues who are from immigration enforcement on the topic of deportation. And, you know, whilst not easy conversations to have, they have been incredibly helpful and valuable, and they've informed policy making for the better. And so we do try and encourage people to do more of that. Similarly, we had a lot of very negative feedback from the deaf and disabled community last year about some of our work about violence against women and girls, which again is an important part of the Home Office's work. And so, you know, what the policy team did there with support from our team was sort of run towards that criticism and meet with those stakeholders, bring them into the department, make sure that actually when we published the Enough campaign a few weeks ago, there was a British Sign Language version to go alongside it, because we are conscious that often women and children are more at risk of violence. So, you know, we are working on it. We completely agree with what you're saying about the need to do that in a really broad and diverse and genuine way. But it is a journey, and it's quite a change from where the Home Office was a couple of years ago. That wasn't our natural way of operating and our natural way of working. So we're getting there, but it will continue. It will continue to need to be done. But hopefully we kind of have examples from around the organisation of where people have done it. It's proven to be really helpful and valuable, and then we're sort of spreading that message to others and encouraging them to do the same.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Neil.
Good evening, members of the Windrush National Organisation, members from other Windrush organisations across the nation, members of the public and the Home Office. My question is going to be about the overseas Windrush victims and where the Home Office stands in this regard. My question is as follows. How does the Home Office claim accountability, if any, towards overseas exiled Windrush parents whose family members have become incapacitated by the scandal towards permanent disability? And how does the Home Office respond towards Windrush victims in relation to disability rights and negligence? Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. I don't know if either of you want to pick up that area.
I can do a little bit. I might, and I can see Gertrude's also made a point about overseas victims. This might be more one that we can direct to Nigel Hills and others from the documentation side, rather than a Wendy Williams recommendation, because I think it probably touches on the issue of whether or not people who have travelled overseas for more than 2 years, whether the fact that they're indefinite leave to remain will therefore will have lapsed. So I think it's to do with nationality in terms of that regard, but I think I'll need to direct your question to Nigel. He'll be better placed to answer it.
Okay, so that's something that we'll have to follow up as part of this process. Jean.
Oh, hi, good evening, everyone. My question to you, Kate, we're quite keen to put on some more promotional events. Is the Home Office willing to fund those? When we put them on in 2018, we actually put the money up front and then the Home Office reimbursed us. Are you willing to do that again? Because I'm hearing that there is no sort of scheme set up to give people money for those one-off events.
Hi,
Yeah,
Jean.
Yeah, I guess this speaks to the wider depth of around engagement with other groups as part of recommendations. Kate or Mark, yep.
Yep, no, I'm happy to come in. So I think Angela Wilson came along to one of the meetings a couple of times ago. So yes, we are potentially very happy to offer to do what we did before. That is something that we have done, that we would like to do again now that physical events are able to be up and running.
Okay.
If you get in touch with us, it will be the similar proposals as we had last time, whereby we can pay for venue hire, we can obviously provide materials, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There is a limit, obviously, to what we can pay for, but we'd be happy to work with anyone to kind of put on some events. I think in the past when we did it, that would include potentially hiring a venue, might include sending some Home Office staff along with some promotional material, us doing a kind of some sort of a presentation, talking to people. I think we've done some with community fund organisations where we've also been able to bring We Are Digital along, and they can support people who are filling out an application. So yeah, there's a whole range of ways in which we can collaborate to run outreach events, and obviously we also run our own outreach events. But if you've got an idea for a venue or a location, then do let us know.
Who's us? Have you got a specific name?
Well, if you want to get in touch, I think I've got your email address anyway. Hopefully you've got mine. If you want to get in touch with me, then I can put you in touch with Angela Wilson, who heads up that team. Or if you've got David or Azar's contact details, they work for Angela. So any of us can help with that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kate.
Thanks, Jean. So one of the recommendations talks about, recommendation 18 talks about improved guidance on the burden and standard of proof. I think it can be commonly said as stakeholders and people on this group that one of the really serious areas that we have to deal with is the pace of getting a decision, and what is quite common is this burden of proof for claimants when they're having to make a claim. And some of I think even the report talks about the CIP talks about, not making it impossible burdens, and this is a common theme. And sometimes we know people who, do you know what? They don't even want to put in a compensation claim because they just feel it's too much work to actually prove it, when they have genuine reasons under the guidance of the compensation claim to actually putting a claim, but they just feel that the burden that is placed upon them is too much. So one of the recommendations is about improving, I noticed this, improving the guidance on the burden and the standard of proof. Is there anything that you would like to shine on that? because this is a very much a common area, and people on this call who are trying to help people would really want to understand what movement is being made by the Home Office to, as it were, not quote, I'm quoting the report, not make impossible burdens of proof, as it were.
Sorry, I was struggling to get off mute there. So, I mean, I'm just looking through what Wendy's assessment of us is on that particular one. I think from our point of view, we think that we've definitely made some progress on this, and Wendy thinks that it is partially met on this recommendation. We have done quite a lot to try and, when it comes to compensation claims, to try and simplify things for people, both in terms of our caseworkers taking a more pragmatic approach wherever possible, and trying to err on the side of probability rather than a sort of legal standard of proof. And that is something that now applies to the compensation scheme. There has been quite a lot of training and development on that. I think we have come a long way in the last sort of year or so in terms of that. But I'm sure there is probably more to do. What I would say is people like We Are Digital can help people with their application. So if someone feels it is just too daunting to even begin to fill out an application form, then I would encourage them to speak to We Are Digital, because they can really help someone to fill out that application and to make that a bit of a more manageable task. Similarly, we have improved the application form so that is more accessible, it's easier to use. Hopefully that makes it easier for people to complete. But you know, we're open to feedback on that. Obviously, we have to have some level of there has to be some level of proof that is met in order to assess that someone is entitled to compensation. But we are definitely trying to err on the side of being pragmatic and sort of proportionate in that, rather than expecting. Minister Foster has said quite a lot of times, you know, it would be completely unreasonable to ask someone to provide too extensive a level of proof of certain things that, you know, most people don't have records that go back that far. So that is something that we are very aware of. And Wendy does note that we have made progress on that, but she also does comment that some of the external people that she spoke to said that they felt the department was still asking them to provide unacceptable levels of proof, and she gives the example of receipts from the 1980s. I think we would agree that that is excessive, and that is something that our revised guidance should have tightened up. So if people are coming across examples of that, then do let us know. And again, there have been a few examples where I think we have asked for clarification of certain things and people have said, actually, I think that's unnecessary. And so the team have then gone back and said, no, you're right, we do have enough. So yeah, do flag to us if you come across that.
And just for clarification, Minister Foster is not me. I'm a religious minister.
No, sorry.
Sorry. Kevin Foster, the MP. Yeah. The immigration minister.
The immigration minister, apologies.
Yeah. If I had that power. Anyway, just on that point, there is a point that Dawn Hill mentions that you might be able to help us with. She asked the question, who decides on the burden of proof and on what is the basis or proof?
Oh, I'm afraid that's a Nigel technical question that I'd need to refer him to.
Yeah, there's a couple of them there that maybe we can group together and get Nigel to come back on. So they're ones we'd want to be really confident that we can share the best answer for you. So.
Great, thank you. Do you want to comment whilst we're just talking about burden of proof and so forth? And I'm just encouraging anyone else who may have a question or point. But would you like to comment on the independent, the actual independent person report on the Windrush compensation scheme and the oversight and performance, because that does make some points about burden of proof and so forth, and explaining that a bit. I don't know if you want to mention that, if you think that's appropriate or not.
So I'm afraid we're straying a bit away from the Wendy Williams revisit, which is where mine and Mark's area of expertise is.
That's fine.
So I'm very happy to chat about our risk management framework, or our openness to scrutiny, or things, or our ethical framework, or something like that. But
Sure.
for the more detailed burden of proof compensation scheme, we should get some compensation scheme colleagues along.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, fine. Just if anyone wants to put anything up or raise a point, please do so. I think, Mark, you mentioned in your part of the presentation about representation at senior level and the importance of that. Can you sort of expand in terms of what would be the area of almost like approach in readdressing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very formal approach in terms of we have a strategic race board, which was put in place as part of recommendation 27, one of Wendy's recommendations, and they as a group are helping us put in place and deliver on our race action plans. So there's a very formal set of commitments that we have made, including publication of how far we've got in terms of that. But also there's a lot that we're doing. I mean, even today I've been in 2 conversations where firstly, as part of an event to essentially with Stephen Lawrence Day, to talk about there we're talking about it actually came as a group of people from the media. So it was, they had the TV producers, but it was a really interesting conversation between them and Matthew as our permanent secretary about how do you create opportunity and how do you really take forward initiatives that are going to make a deliberate and persistent difference. So we have some very formal things that we're doing around how roles are advertised and how shortlisting takes place, so it's all anonymized. We have ways that we compose panels, but also other things as well. So we've got reverse mentoring schemes, just really helping people to think differently, and also championing people and sponsoring people. So that sense of beyond being a mentor, or this is actually going to go out of my when there's someone that I champion. It's incredibly rewarding, because it's then about going, you get to really understand that person and how you can help them, and you actively go out of your way to help them be more successful in their career, to make the connections that they wouldn't be able to make otherwise, in much more active sense than maybe a mentoring relationship. So we have things that we are having in place very formally about process. We have things that are much more about culturally how we are trying to be different, and what's really powerful about the strategic race board is that they bring strong external perspectives from both the community and other organizations to say, but if you want to be better at this, these are the sorts of things you should be doing. Or actually, if you really want to make a difference, you ought to be considering this as well. And that challenge is a really rich part of that conversation. So very explicitly, we said we know we need to do better, but I think a combination of our formal plans and then the actual, the more cultural changes we're making, I believe will generate the change we're looking for. But I think it's really important that we internally and also externally are held to account for that progress, because as we know, good intent does not always end up being the outcome that we're hoping for. I don't know, Kate, I don't know if anything you wanted to add, but.
No, I don't think so. Just, I guess, just to echo, really, it is really noticeable that at the more junior levels of the organisation, we have quite a diverse workforce. And as it becomes more senior, and this is a civil service problem, not just with the Home Office, it's across all government departments. Representation, particularly of Black and Asian minority ethnic colleagues, drops off at those more senior levels. And there's a lot of work going on to try and address that. Because it cannot be the case, it cannot be right that whatever our systems are for supporting and promoting colleagues is not impacting in a sort of fair and equal way across all different groups. And and similarly it's the same for disabled colleagues, and to a lesser extent for females. That has improved more in recent years, but the civil service has got a long way to go at senior levels in order to be as representative as it is at the more junior levels. At more junior levels, it's incredibly representative of the nation and of our country and the communities we serve, but that isn't reflected at senior levels. And I'll just, on the overseas issue, I've just checked back through the answers that Bishop Jaddy referred to earlier that are that've gone up on the website. I think there were quite a lot of questions about people who were overseas raised in the February meeting, and Nigel has provided quite a lot of answers to that question in the PDFs that have been uploaded on the website. So hopefully that will address some of those points.
Thanks, Kate and Mark, for those responses. So, yes, so Roland, I know you put a question around that. Do get onto our website, have a look at those questions that are specifically Nigel from the Home Office spoke to, and if they're still not addressing your queries around the overseas victim, then do get in contact with us, and we're happy to progress anything that may not have been covered. June Elizabeth, I noticed you had your hand up.
It's okay. My question has been answered by Kate. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I think
also Gertrude's question about recommendation 5.
Sorry, who was that? Sorry, Kate, what was that?
Gertrude put a question in the side about recommendation 5.
Oh yeah, that's just come through. I mean, if you want to address that, and if
I'm very happy to, because recommendation 5 is one of the ones that that my team own. Quite a lot of the other recommendations.
Yeah, so we'll just read this out for those who may not have access to the chat, just for sake of helping. So, what progress? And Gertrude has put this message on, unless Gertrude wants to come on and say it herself, she's welcome to, but I'm happy to read it on her behalf. What progress has been made recommendation 5, looking beyond the Caribbean? Wendy Williams did not really cover this in any depth. There are hundreds of Commonwealth Windrush victims stuck overseas, and many do not even know about the Windrush scheme. All of the Windrush victims that I know personally in Nigeria were refused returning residence visas under the Windrush scheme. So what is their fate now? And they all had the ILR, indefinite leave to remain. Does this mean that many affected family and friends will never return to the UK? So Kate, you wanted to pick that up?
Yeah, so in terms of recommendation 5 and looking beyond the Caribbean, we have done a lot of work working with High Commissioners and focusing at the request of High Commissioners and in discussion with High Commissioners, focusing on non-Caribbean communities in the UK. That is where we have been advised by High Commissioners and others that the focus should be. So for most people applying for documentation, they will be people who are in the UK, who have not left the UK, because obviously, to go to the point that Nigel's answered in the separate questions, indefinite leave to remain is about whilst you remain in the UK, not if you leave for more than 2 years. So our focus has very much been on those communities in the UK. We've been focusing on people from Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. We've been working with community representatives from those organisations, and in fact, Gertrude's provided some very helpful advice to some of our colleagues about how we might reach people in the UK. We've also done outreach events with High Commissioners, both those people in the UK, but also High Commissions abroad. And we've made sure that lots of materials are translated and that feature people who are going to have more resonance to those communities. So some of the research that we've done, particularly with the South Asian community, has pointed out that the term Windrush can sometimes be off-putting and can suggest to people that this isn't an issue that applied to them, whereas in fact all Commonwealth countries were impacted by this. And I think we've seen around, I think it's around 2,000 people who were with Indian nationality have applied for documentation and have successfully been given documentation. So we're doing a lot more to try and promote that. I can put some links in the side, but we've done a lot with, say, Eastern Eye and other kind of mediums, radio in particular, to try and get those messages across and to make sure that our materials are translated into the right languages for people. And in fact, we've got various experts coming into the department to speak to us about that. So we've got an event coming up in a couple of weeks focused on the British Bangladeshi community and how we can better understand that community in order to make our outreach more impactful.
Thank you, Kate, around that response to people outside in the UK. Charlie Williams.
Hi, hi Kate, hi Mark. Given the then Prime Minister said this whole Windrush scandal will be cleared up within weeks originally, we're 4 years on. What will it take to clear all the applications within 6 weeks, 6 months? What will it take to clear everything up within 6 months? What do you feel it will take? What do you need to achieve that?
Yeah, so again, we are slightly straying into the compensation scheme territory. I'm not quite sure what Nigel has said on this previously, but we've managed to reduce the backlog quite substantially. So I think there are certainly less than 200 cases now, which predate 2021, so sort of effectively much more than a year old. There are less than 200 of those, which is a big improvement on where we were previously. There is a lot of focus to clear cases that have been waiting. Once we've cleared those ones that are over a year, obviously then we're focusing on the ones that are more than 6 months. And we now publish data monthly, and we're seeing improvements in sort of reducing that lag. We've got a lot more staff coming into the compensation scheme. I think we'll be going up to 120 staff very shortly. I can't remember what the latest number is that Nigel's got, but it's definitely increased a lot recently. And that's why I think last month was like the biggest paying, last quarter was the biggest paying quarter that we've seen so far on the compensation scheme. So I'm not quite sure what the trajectory is in terms of what the date is when we will be down to having cleared that 6 months, but we're definitely making good progress. And I wasn't aware actually that the Prime Minister at the time said it would be cleared up within a few weeks.
Oh, I remember it
Mark
well.
and I only joined the team a couple of years ago, so I can only imagine that they didn't understand the scale of the challenge if they said that.
So to be very clear, are you saying you're confident this could be cleared up within 6 months? Yes or no?
I mean, that will certainly be the ambition, is to reduce the waiting time so that people aren't waiting.
Yeah, I'm saying 6 months specifically. What is it you feel, in your experience thus far, what do you feel you need? More staff? More money? What do you feel you need?
So I'm not from the compensation scheme. So Mark and I lead the work on the Wendy Williams Lessons Learned Review, whereas Nigel leads the compensation scheme. So I'd have to ask Nigel. I think he did talk about that a little bit when he was on before. So I can check through the Q&A. That might have been something Yeah, that might have been something Nigel covered, but that would be for compensation colleagues. And just to say on June Elizabeth has put a thing in the sidebar about the compensation scheme closing in 2023. That is not the case. So the compensation scheme will remain open indefinitely, whilst we obviously want to encourage people to apply to it as soon as possible. You know, we wouldn't want people hanging on for ages because we want them to apply sooner rather than later. There is no end date for the compensation scheme. So if in 10 years' time someone becomes aware that they are eligible, we will obviously honour that, that compensation.
Okay, thank you. And I think we'll pick up that point Charlie made with Nigel, as you suggested there, specifically around the compensation. So thanks for that. And thanks for that, June Elizabeth, for that query and that clarification, Kate. Herman, Irish, you've got your hand raised. Want to come forward with the question? Herman Irish, I'm not sure if you're frozen now. Maybe that's the case. But if you can hear us, if you can get your connection sorted out, or if you want to put something in the chat, but it looks like your screen is now, your line's actually frozen. If you want to reconnect, perhaps, and make your point. I'm just checking out the actual chat for that in the last 5 minutes. So there's a point by Judy about successful claims and how that publicity could lead to more people coming forward and a surge of new claimants.
I mean, we would be delighted if that was the case. We do try and find positive examples of people. One of the things that we're aware of is obviously a lot of the reporting of the compensation scheme in the media can potentially come across as putting people off from applying. And so the more positive stories that we're able to get out there, the better. And some people have kind of come forward. We've got a really good video on our website of one of the successful claimants talking about how they went through their claim and how the process was for them. So we would be very happy with more sort of positive promotional stories. Our community fund organisations are quite helpful for that. I think maybe the Home Office is not the right person to always get those positive stories out, but we would certainly encourage people, if they have had a positive experience or they do know of someone who has, to encourage others to apply, because we are aware that some people are put off from applying. I think our planning assumption at the moment is that we're likely to see up to around 6,000 claims for compensation. We've had 4,000 so far, and we have already dealt with about half of those claims. So, hopefully there are a few more people out there that we can persuade to come forward. I don't think it would be massively more in terms of number, but obviously if it is, then that is also fine, and we will honour all of those claims.
Okay, thank you. We're coming down to the last few minutes in this session in response to the Wendy Williams progress report. So if you do have any points you wish to make, please do make those, because we'll be moving on to a couple of the other points on the agenda and then ending the meeting. Just wanted to ask our Home Office representatives about the Wendy Williams report recommendation around the which is really, I guess, important for stakeholders, about recommendation 5, about being more proactive in identifying those affected. And there was quite a lengthy response that he gave, and it really is, I guess, looking to the Home Office with regards to its breadth and reach in how it is going to be more proactive in this area. And I'd like to offer you the chance to sort of respond to that.
Yeah, so one of the ways that we've seen success in being more proactive, which is one of the things we really want to focus on over the next 6 months or so, is where we do that through other trusted parties. And we are conscious that our kind of standard approach of the Home Office putting an article in a newspaper, or the Home Office running an outreach event, isn't always, I think I've forgotten the lady who mentioned it earlier, but that's potentially just going to reach the same people that we already speak to, rather than you know, actually getting out to new, fresh stakeholders. And so the work that we've been doing through the Community Fund has been really helpful. And our immigration minister has been on various visits. Some of our team went to Wales last week to see a project based in Wales, which is working with the Windrush community there. Again, we've also got work going on in Scotland. So we are trying to get out and to sort of beyond our traditional audiences, and in particular working with other Commonwealth organisations based in the UK to try and tap into their networks. We've done a lot through churches and religious organisations, but that's another area where I think we potentially will have a bit more success in sort of reaching out beyond our traditional communities. One of the things we've seen quite a lot of positive work around is actually thinking about how can we reach people's relatives. So perhaps the grandchildren of people who might be eligible for compensation, and encourage them to support their parents or grandparents to apply, and that might also make it easier for people to come forward. And again, that's a route. I think the Home Office are equally bad at speaking to young people in a way that's going to have resonance. And so again, we're trying to work through trusted parties who have got that voice and who have got the ear of young people and can communicate in a more authentic way that will have resonance with them. Mark and I will not be producing a TikTok video, but we are very happy to work with some organisations that have got those kind of contacts and that can do that on our behalf.
Okay, thank you. And our last question, Herman Irish, I don't know if you're connected back with us now. We did lose you. Herman,
good evening, everyone. I'm sorry, I've been going in and out all night. I'm not sure what's happening. Just a question for Kate. There's a few questions I've got, but I'll have to get those to you directly because of time and so forth. But I'm a little bit worried with regard to maybe the distance now, like Wendy's finished particular work. And it seems to me, you know, from a point of view of a sort of continuity, in a sense with regard to, I mean, she is the person, that's the person who's actually begun, if you like, the hand-holding session with the Home Office with regard to working together. And that sort of distance to me is with regard to that. How do you see that could actually keep, you know, run true with regard to the recommendations, in a sense, she be able to see the checks and balances which come into play, and actually how to help unravel them as well, that she would be particularly missing. And I know you mentioned she's got a meeting soon with the permanent secretary, but especially with regard to, I'm not too sure with regard to external stakeholders or those who oversee the scheme, like I think is it the Equalities and Human Rights Commission? I'm not too sure what's their remit with yourselves from a point of view of evaluation and monitoring with regard to how you're doing with the recommendations as well. So I'm just a little worried with that, whereby, you know, and the longer it goes on with regard to that it gets somewhat distant, I think, with regard to keeping, you know, whether there's a real focus on with regard to the recommendations which needed to be done. Just from the point of view with regard to that was the person who's actually began the process, and through her eyes, she'll have a better, if you like, view about it, rather than someone fresh coming in, if that had to be the case, to have a look. So I'm just a little bit worried with that. I've got some other questions, but I'll have to send those to you directly, Kate. Yeah,
thanks,
is that all right? Thank you.
I'll
go ahead, Mark.
If I may, thank you very much, Herman. Really good question. I really understandable in that sense of, if Wendy's not returning, how will we be held to account and how we hold ourselves to account? So I think first of all, Wendy not coming back isn't about us not wanting to, or indeed Wendy not wanting to. It's about going, we need to really own this now and deliver it for ourselves and for everybody else, not because Wendy's going to be coming back on, you know, every year for how many years it takes. So that's sort of a really important reason why we and Wendy were keen that arrangement was going to be different going forward. So that's about us really owning it. We've been able to account in a number of ways. So externally through you know, the Public Accounts Committee, the Home Affairs Select Committee, at the very top level of scrutiny through the House of Commons and the ministerial members. There's a real sense there of accountability there, and they will be very interested in the progress we are making. Indeed, one of the things that we did when we responded to Wendy's review was to write to them and to provide them with an update on where we are. So that's a conversation that we have, and our permanent secretary regularly appears there. So you have that level of external scrutiny. Rightly, as you say, there'll be other people as well that will be looking. So the EHRC we have relationships with. There are others, external bodies, that will also be either formally or informally holding us to account to what we've already published. So as we said earlier, we have a published improvement plan, and people will be able to hold us to account for that. But also internally as well, I think there's a real sense of, as Kate said, as we start to move to this being our programme, our work, really demonstrating that commitment to our colleagues, and reassurance that this will be different, that this will genuinely happen. I think is, you know, it is in some senses, yeah, it's really important that we have to account by external bodies. It's really important that we have to account by the House of Commons and the parliamentary bodies. But it's also actually I suppose that I feel the weight, in the best sense, of expectation from my colleagues. It's when you're in a room with people you work with, and you're not able to show them the progress you want to make, and the disappointment you feel about that. I think that feeling is actually really powerful as well. So I think, you know, that's it, Herman. So really formal things, you can imagine the press, you know, there are all sorts of people that are continually looking for signs of change and progress in the department. But actually that sense of we're going to really own it, and we'll hold ourselves to account for successfully delivering this, for really making that change, for all of us to feel different, that this is a place that is different, I think is probably, of all of them at a personal level, the one that I feel most acutely.
Yeah, can I just come back just on that? It's not from the point of view, like, you know, with ownership as such, but if you like, you've got someone there who's been with you, let's say in the engine room, yes? So as through the, you know, to get to the destination as such, I think as for each juncture, each stop, each avenue where you get to, that person actually should be there with regard to point of view, maybe not oversight, but with regard to seeing that it sticks to its merits of its values and what it's about, with the recommendation. So you can still have the ownership as such. What I'm sort of saying, it could be a void in the sense, well, when Wendy Williams got involved up to a certain stage, she's not around now. Yes, that's the sort of echo chamber which is coming back to me when I speak to people in the community. It's like, oh well, she's not going to be there now, and that's it. Which to me, you need to be aware of that, because then actually it could cheapen the work that you do. Yes, it actually lessens the resonance of that actual particular, those recommendations as well. You know, I'm just sort of saying, and also maybe over time as well, with some of those recommendations may need to be in some way tweaked in some way, shape or form as more information emerges, yes, with regard to the recommendations as a whole over the years. As you said, it's not closing in 2023.
Sorry, yeah. Herman, I'm going to have to cut you. I think you've made your point, and I think we've got that.
Great. I'll keep quiet. I don't normally speak much, but at least
but I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Kate and Mark. I'm going to hand back over to Bishop Desmond at this point, just to close the final notices, and also with Nigel Gatt. Bishop Desmond.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and thank you for your contributions this evening. Thank you, Reverend Clive, for managing tonight as well. It was interesting doing more listening, to be perfectly honest. on this particular part of the agenda. My only concern has ever been the pace of dealing with this, and Kate shaking because that's a conversation we've always had. It's the pace of dealing with this, and we're 4 years in and we're still talking about some of the same things, and that can be an issue. But it's important that we have these meetings and that we work together in the best way we possibly can to try and come to some form of common ground, as it were, in terms of pushing this agenda forward. And talking about common ground, Nigel Guy, our Director of Marketing, is going to talk to us very briefly about raising the standard. Nigel, over to you.
If somebody can give me the opportunity to share a screen. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Nigel Guy. I'm Director of Windrush Generations. And I just want to tell you about one of the projects that we're working on. And one of the projects we're working on is to raise the standard for Windrush. Now, raising the standard for Windrush is in every facet of what Windrush is about. And we've been talking about some very important things today, which is the Wendy Williams review and some challenges that are there to kind of raise the standard. And I just feel that we need to induce a rebirth of moving a momentum of getting the changes that are happening in the Home Office, as well as the Windrush compensation and status, to be more active and have better results. One of the projects that we're doing collectively with the Windrush National Organisation is the raising the standard, and that is because the anniversary for the Windrush Empire Windrush coming to dock in the UK, and an acknowledgement of the contributions that people from the Caribbean and also the Commonwealth have made. And we have a flag that we're wanting and have been raising in many towns and cities, not just locally to where I live in Yorkshire, but throughout the UK. We've got the Home Office involved in this, the House of Commons in the UK, but also the House of Parliament in Jamaica, and we're wanting to widen this. And we're asking you all on this platform to be involved in chartering the 7 C's of Windrush, and that is the contributions of the Windrush generations, the commemorations of the Windrush generations, the celebrations, the care that's needed for the Windrush generations, the challenges, the conflicts, and the change that is needed for the Windrush generations. And just a few pictures of, in terms of the logo and emblem that we're celebrating and moving forward. And this is to raise awareness that Windrush still has an impact in terms of the Windrush compensation scheme and the status, but also the celebrations and commemorations that people have made and put greatness back into Britain. And just images of how the flag has been raised in many towns and cities and in different headquarters, and like it's been raised at every train station in the UK with Network Rail, raised at the Home Office, outside the Parliament, various towns and cities throughout the UK, but also in the Caribbean. And if you haven't got your flag raised in your town and city, get involved, take a lead on it, and raise the standard for Windrush. And raising the standard for Windrush is not just about the flag, but raising awareness that as a people, we need to see an improvement in circumstances, but also in acknowledgement of the contributions that we have made, because the narrative for Windrush is not all about conflict, it's all about the contributions and celebrations. So get involved and actually initiate a way of making your community, your area, aware of the life and times of people from the Windrush generation. So I just want to say, get involved. If you want to find out more details, there's details on here, and we'll send you further details. And I think that everybody here is wanting to see the standard raised for Windrush. Thank you. You're on mute, Des.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for that. And the famous Marcus Garvey quote springs to mind: there are people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. In terms of Windrush generation, a lot of this has happened simply because, I think one could say, because of ignorance, because many people didn't understand the journey of the Windrush generation. And as a part of our work, and it's in our strategy document and also Wendy Williams' recommendations, is that all important education aspect. so that our youngsters understand where they are coming from. And on a wider contextual basis, that they understand as well that sometimes, you know, their grandparents at some point in their lives probably shared a bed, not at the same time, but on the bed shift system, for example. So there are important aspects, and what Nigel talks about and what we're trying to do at WNO is help people who are caught up in the scandal, but at the same time try to educate, particularly young people, about the journey, because we all have undertaken a journey. I was born here in 1966. You know, to me, people ask me until this day, where am I from? And so there is an issue that we have still today of acceptance in this country that we're actually British. And what we need to do is to drive this message home. In Birmingham, we've got the Commonwealth Games coming up. We want to capitalize upon that as well. We're working on that now. Despite the publicity, we are having conversations with them. But one important thing, this country has an issue with reflective governance. We talk about our diversity, but we're not embracing our diversity. So just like the Home Office being very white when it comes to management, even the Commonwealth Games is very white when it comes to management of the Commonwealth Games as well. So clearly there is an historical issue here that has to be dealt with. But at least I think tonight, I do appreciate the acknowledgement from the Home Office that's still a work in progress, as it were. But it is absolutely crucial that also as well, when members of the Black or Asian community do get into senior management positions, that they do feel that they are welcome there as well, because there is research that clearly shows that once people get into those positions, they're not there for very long either. And that's another issue that we have to look at. But at least that's a work in progress. Now, the main announcement from me tonight is that, as you are aware, 21st of May was our scheduled international conference. The Home Office have been supportive with that. However, we met this morning as a board as some of our directors met this morning, and we have taken the decision to defer the conference until October. Logistically, we had some issues with some of the main speakers that we wanted to get into the conference. And one thing we want to do as well is deliver a conference of a very high standard. And also as well, some of the thematics you gave us at our last meeting, we've realized that we have to look more in depth at them and do more research into those thematic areas before we really get the conference together. So we're giving ourselves ample lead time on this now, that we can take it forward. So the provisional date, we're awaiting Birmingham City University. The decision was only taken this morning, a few hours ago actually. We're just waiting confirmation of the new date, but provisionally the date is the 22nd of October, and it will be 2 years since we launched our strategy document as well, which our new updated strategy document will be there as well. And we hope to have further conversations with the Home Office in terms of ensuring that their support is there in terms of moving it forward. And when we say support, they don't control the agenda. We negotiate what the agenda is. We have them input in, because remember, ultimately, it's a meeting to develop common ground. And that's the thing. So moving this forward, we all have our roles to play. I'm not here to knock anyone whatsoever. What we're here to do is build bridges that we can get the best we possibly can. And Judy, I welcome your comments about building that trust so we can get those guys, particularly the men who are under the radar, get them out from under the radar so that they can come forward and get themselves sorted, because the problem is they're comfortable where they are. And we need to deal with that as well. And I'm sure that together we can make that all important difference. So on that note, so please make a note of that provisional new date. And we will be contacting all parties concerned about the next steps of that. So it will still be in Birmingham, and as we said, the date is the 22nd of October, and we'll just await confirmation from Birmingham City University on that. Now, the other thing, our Windrush Welfare Fund, we will launch it on that day. Very briefly, because I know we're over time, and I do sincerely apologize. Our welfare fund, that is something that is desperately needed. We've had a couple of bereavements where thankfully we've got exceptional payments from the Home Office. So thank you for that. But remember, those exceptional payments are advances could be deducted out of any final compensation award. However, there are people in our community that need help. And what we've been doing over the past 4 years is assisting people sometimes out of our own pockets. And what we want to do now as a community, sometimes we've got to stand on our own 2 feet and ensure that we can help people who are in desperate need of that all important help and be relevant and start turning Windrush into a positive, as opposed to being looked upon as a complete negative as well. But it's the actions that we take that will define the future of our generation. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening in this evening and for your participation, your questions. We will be having our meeting next month. Some comments which have been made in the chat, we will take them out. I will forward them to Nigel Hills. Our next meeting is Thursday, the 19th of May. And please have a look at the website. Have a look. The new questions which have been posted are February and March. They both arrived this morning. They are now on the website. Please have a look. And importantly, we've presented them in such a way that you can go onto the website and you can actually download them or you can print them off as well. So, you know, just visit the website, windrushnationalorganisation.com, and they're there. They're prominently displayed. Feel free to have a look at them. And is it, Gerard, if you feel that your questions still haven't been answered, let us know and we'll take those up as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining this evening. I'll hand back to Reverend Clive, who will just pray a blessing, and we'll see you next month. Reverend Clive.
Thank you, Bishop Desmond. So those of you who wish to join in prayer will do so now just to close the meeting. Shall we pray? Father, we just again come before you in the name of your Son, Jesus. We just thank you for all that you are to us, for keeping us and strengthening us. We know that you're a God of love, mercy, justice, and righteousness. And we ask that you watch over us all. And we continue to look to you to be our guide and our strength. And we give you thanks in all things. For Christ's sake. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, everyone. God bless you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all. Bye.